I'm Judith Rue, and I chair the Frontiers in Science lecture series. Our sponsor is Dr. Jenny Griselli Brown and her husband, who were unable to be here tonight, but we thank them for what they do. Our speaker this evening is Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She's the author of 18 books, several of which have been on the New York Times bestseller list. She's also authored many book chapters and numerous research articles. Dr. Grandin has been interviewed on multiple television network shows, public radio. She's done a TED Talk. She's been featured in articles in the New York Times, People Magazine, Forbes, U.S. News and World Report, Time, and many others. Her life story has been made into a movie. Dr. Grandin has also designed livestock handling facilities that help reduce the stress on animals during handling. She's written and spoken extensively about autism and autism spectrum disorders. There is so much more I could say, but I'm going to stop here. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Temple Grandin.
Really great to be here. Got lots of things to talk about tonight. And one thing I want to talk about is identity. Autism is an important part of who I am. But being a professor of animal science, all the thing designer of equipment, that comes first. Because when I was out working in the cattle industry, we were out building stuff and was working with a lot of skilled tradespeople. I'm going to estimate that 20% of those people would be special ed kids today, either autistic, dyslexic, ADHD. And I'm saying that seriously. The special ed department builds the stuff. Now, the thing I want to show right now is let's look at some famous people. And what would happen to some of these famous people in today's educational system? Would they have been as successful? I want to try to bust you out of the special ed silo. That's what I want to try to do. We get too hung up on the labels. And the other problem that we've got with autism is it goes all the way from Einstein, who had no speech at age 3, to somebody who's not able to dress themselves. And it's all got the same name. Now, I'm a visual thinker, where everything I think about is in pictures. That doesn't make too much sense. Okay, Michelangelo. There's his art. You all know about that. He was a 6th grade dropout. He quit school at age 12. He was raised in a family of stonecutters because his mother died at an early age. So he got early exposure to some of the tools of art. His father despised art, and he did not want to learn Latin and write boring legal documents and business papers. How boring when you can do art. Now, another important thing for Michelangelo was he was exposed to it at an early age. And I was just looking up Dr. Brown, who sponsored my talk. She's done things with chemistry and spectrometry. She loved her first chemistry class. That gets back to getting exposed to something. Getting exposed to something. How can you find out if you like something if you never get exposed? I get asked all the time, how did I end up in the cattle industry? Well, I ended up in the cattle industry because I was exposed to it as a teenager. It's that simple. Okay, what would happen to Beethoven today? You know, he had family, had a lot of problems, abusive father. He did his greatest works when he was half deaf and totally deaf. Would he have done that today? He had a piano company build this thing on his piano to help him hear. Yeah, he wanted to get stuff done. He actually started breaking pianos because he was hitting them so hard. And at the end, he couldn't perform anymore. When he wrote Ode to Joy, he could no longer perform. because he was stone deaf, but he still wrote it. Now, this is the different kinds of thinking. This is one of my most important slides. And when I was young and I first started working in the cattle industry, I thought everybody was a visual thinker like me. And that's shown very nicely in my movie. Temple Grandin movie shows visual thinking. I'm what's called an object visualizer. But us visual thinkers can't do algebra. Now, yes, for chemistry you need algebra, but for a lot of other kind of work, you don't need algebra. And I'm seeing kids being kept out of doing a skilled trade because they can't do algebra. We're losing skills. I'm going to be getting into that later. But I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. Everything I think about is a picture. Nothing's abstract. Then you have your mathematical thinker. They think in patterns, not pictures, but patterns. Now, you got a little third grader that's good at math, you need to be giving them harder math. Don't make them do the baby stuff. Then you have the verbal people who think totally in words. And I think it's hard for some of the verbal people to imagine other kinds of thought. One of the fights that's been going on in schools with little math geniuses is to make them show their work. That's not how their mind works. It's not how their mind works. And right now, the Silicon Valley and all the computer companies, they're looking for coders. They can't get them because the kids are playing video games instead of learning how to code. Again, somebody's got to expose them to coding. Now, that didn't work for me. I tried Fortran. Now I'm really showing my age. Fortran. And I wanted to do it, but it just wasn't for me. And then most so-called normal people, they're mixtures of the different kinds of minds. And then you got some dyslexic people, they think in auditory, totally hearing thinkers. Turns out I got a really big visual thinking circuit in my head. That was a lot of fun finding that out. And there's another picture of it. But right there's the trashed out working memory. You see, if I was a computer, I got the Amazon or the Microsoft cloud, whichever one you prefer, but I've got the cloud for memory, but I'm accessing it through a one-bar phone. Or if you know the dial-up days, okay, I think some rural people still know what that is. You're accessing it through a little tiny processor. So problems with shifting attention is hard. Tasks that involve remembering strings of verbal information, that's hard. I have no working memory. But for doing design work, I don't need working memory. Because once I got the cloud open, that's great. But it's when I'm switching back and forth between things. Now, how do you figure out what kind of a thinker a kid is? Visual thinkers? By third grade, they're usually good at drawing. And I went to the beautiful art store. They were making all this art that people with different abilities were making. Really creative, something that's just being done in the community. Yep, some of those people have some professional level art. They need to put it in some professional shows. Yeah, there was some good, really, really good stuff there. Visual thinkers build things. They do art. The mathematicians, they like to build things too. They often like music. And you need to be exposing them to math. Don't make them do baby stuff. Verbal thinkers, they often love facts and history. Really good on facts. Now, what kind of jobs can these people do when they grow up? My kind of mind, graphic design, industrial design, and high-end skilled trades. You know, the real high-end stuff that we have a huge shortage of right now. Math thinkers, go out to Silicon Valley. I've been to Silicon Valley. Half those programmers have autism, and they avoid the labels. This is what makes me crazy as I go back and forth between the silos. I walk into a room. This is last year. This isn't 20 years ago. This is last year. I walk into a room. I sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't say where the room is, except it is in the U.S. A big, huge room with 100 programmers in it. Long bench desks, totally silent, glued to their computers, and getting paid a pile of money. And then there's another kid just like him playing video games in the basement and not learning any coding. The verbal thinkers, well, one of the things they can be really good at for a job is specialized sales. There's been some big success stories with selling cars because they're recognized for their ability to know everything about the product. That's a skill other people want. So those are the different kinds of thinkers. And there's evidence that these different kinds of thinkers exist in my book, The Autistic Brain. I think the bookstores run out of most of the books, but there's plenty of them available online. All right, let's look at one of the greatest achievements of my generation. When I was in high school and college, I worshiped the astronauts. I'll never forget going outside at night and looking up at the moon and thinking there's men walking on the moon. Now, it's just now come out, certain people that were not recognized before, that were totally mission critical. And without these people, they couldn't have landed on the moon. And one was Hal, the reclusive, weird math guy in a messy office at MIT, who did algebra for fun. Definitely not my kind of mind. Algebra for fun. And he admits that he didn't do much of the work. But what he did is he made the equations that made it possible for this very primitive computer that was basically a 70-pound calculator to land on the moon. Even after the system crashed, they were able to reboot it. An algebra guy, mission critical. Without his formulas, the lunar lander probably would have crashed. This is stuff that's coming out now. Now, I had a chance to visit Cape Kennedy 2.5 years ago. That was very emotional. I got to go inside the vehicle assembly building. I even got to go on the roof. Then I found out later that my clearance, I wasn't cleared to go on the roof. But that was a lot of fun. I like being a little naughty. But that was a really emotional experience because in my generation, we really did some stuff. And now, who managed the space program? The engineers managed the whole program. But then, of course, we know the hidden figure ladies, Katherine Johnson. They did hand calculations for the suborbital flights and the first orbital flights by hand. This is pre-computer. And they've just recently gotten the recognition that they should get. And now we've got to give some recognition to some other very critical people. The seamstresses at Playtex that sewed the spacesuit. And I don't think the guys could stand the thought of the Playtex living spacesuit. But that's what it was. It was a Playtex living spacesuit. 4 of the finest bra seamstresses at Playtex sewed it. And their boss was a former TV repairman, probably a visual thinker. He was the bra designer for Playtex. And the mathematical guys didn't really, like this very much. But Playtex won the bid. It's just that simple. Mission critical. Without the spacesuit, you couldn't do the mission. And when I went to visit NASA, I got to visit this launch pad that was about 90% completed when I was there 2.5 years ago. And what I found out is it's infrastructure like this launch pad built by the special ed department. I talked to a guy who's dyslexic who did launch control rooms. I talked to a guy at Tourette's that ran this project. Would you rather be Mr. Tourette's or Mr. Launchpad? Now I'm going to explain to you why you need to have visual thinkers like me. Because I found something in this launch pad that was not supposed to be there, that nobody else noticed. And as I walked under there, a raccoon waddled down the steps and went into the bushes. There'd been a raccoon inside there at night. And I got thinking, what have you been chewing? Yeah, maybe something mission critical is chewing. I'd want to check that out. Now, my grandfather, he was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. And he worked with a guy who today would probably be labeled autistic. A guy that came up with this weird, crazy idea for 3 little coils that would sense where the plane was in the magnetic field. I looked at that and I'm going, semicircular canals for airplanes. If you've looked up the semicircular canals, this is sort of designed the same way. My grandfather was a traditional mathematical engineer, but the other guy was probably the visual thinker. So that's the math mind and the visual thinker working together. This was in every airplane during World War II, every single one of them, and it still is in some planes. I'm seeing too many kids getting a label. Dyslexic, ADHD. ADHD crosses over with autism, about 30% of the genetics, 30% of the brain scan findings are the same. That's why they get mixed up. And I'm worried that our educational system is screening out a lot of these kids. Can't graduate from high school in Kentucky without algebra. And then the kids kept out of auto shop. Well, how stupid. So what do? Now, when I was in college, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer, and I had to drop a biomedical engineering course because I couldn't do the math. But guess what? Meat industry, no academic barrier of entry. You can get a job in a meat plant and end up building the next addition and doing tons of engineering without an engineering degree. See, because there's two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part, and then there's a more visual thinking part of it. Thomas Edison was labeled a hyperactive adult high school dropout. What saved him, homeschooled with lots of books, but he also had a paper route at a very young age. He was running a business at a young age. He learned how to work. Jane Goodall, when she did her famous work, had a 2-year secretarial degree. Could that get pulled off today? And then another question I get asked is, how did I manage to get through college without algebra? Well, in '67, the math class that was required was not algebra. It was probability, matrices, and statistics, and they called it finite math. Bit more visual. With tutoring, I got through it. Steven Spielberg, lousy student, bullied in school, dyslexic. And when I was in high school, I got bullied all the time. And the only places I was not bullied, when I was out horseback riding. And the other thing I did, after I got kicked out of a regular 9th grade, went to special schools, I ran their horse barn for 3 years. So I learned how to work. I learned the responsibility of taking care of 9 horses, cleaning out 9 stalls every day, putting them in and out, feeding them. Now, another thing about Steven Spielberg, he was exposed to movie making at a young age. His little movie camera. I tell students when they're in college, do internships. Get involved with different research projects that are going on at the college so you can try on careers, try on stuff, find out what you hate, find out what you like. We need to be keeping these classes in the schools. Art, sewing, theater, woodworking, welding. I've talked to a lot of people that work backstage in these great big venues. Oh, the special ed department puts all that scaffolding stuff up. I've talked to 3 parents where their kid's doing what's called technical theater. Lights for Cirque du Soleil. One family was very upset because the kid had right now. When the doctors get replaced with artificial intelligence, those computers aren't fixing that hospital air conditioning system. Definitely not. A Nobel Prize winner was 50% more likely to have an arts and crafts hobby compared to other scientists. That's another reason for keeping these classes. Taking those classes out, worst thing we ever did. Steve Jobs, bullied in school. Oh yeah, Silicon Valley, they avoid the autism label. Half those programmers probably have autism. Don't put the A word on Steve. This slide right here got inspected by a big Silicon Valley company to make sure the A word wasn't on there. It's not on there, but I can say it now. And when I was out in Silicon Valley, I don't say it. Einstein didn't know speech until age 3. Where would he end up today? See, I want to get you really thinking. I want to bust you out of the silo. The connection between Steve Jobs and so-called useless humanities programs such as calligraphy should not be ignored. He was an artist. That's why your phone's easy to use. An artist made the interface. The mathematicians had to make the phone work. That's the different minds working together. So the first step is realizing that you do have different minds. We got kids today that don't know how to hook up a garden hose. We got a lot of kids today who are totally removed from the world of the practical. And they want to get involved in political science and policy and stuff like that, but they've never worked with anything on the ground. I went to a green biz meeting. A lot of the stuff was totally abstract. I worked on improving cattle handling. Also, I have a piece of equipment called the center track restrainer system that I designed for big meat plants. If you watch the HBO movie, the shop drawings for that are in the titles. I love to have my drawings in that movie. I worked with a lot of skilled tradespeople making that stuff. Some that were on, one guy I worked with, autistic, whole ton of patents, owned a metal fabrication company. How about another guy that stutters, ADHD, dyslexic, owns another metal fabrication company. But these people are retiring, they're not getting replaced. And the problem is if you don't do real stuff, you don't learn practical problem solving. Things will get way too vague. Well, I don't know about an electric drill for a kid that young, but let's get kids doing more real things. I mean, I was using tools by second grade. Pliers, hammer, screwdriver, things like that. We got kids today growing up that have never used a tool. No, that's not good. Now, like this kindergarten they had in Missouri, it was based on an Italian model. Let me tell you, the Italians, they make lots of fancy equipment. They were selling it at the poultry show. I was just there in January. I sort of think it's interesting going back and forth between the autism world, and then I'm at the poultry show, this big, gigantic trade show. Fancy piece of equipment there. It looked like a corn harvester. They use it for picking up chickens. It came out of Italy. And the kind of person that figures that sort of stuff out is the kid that's dyslexic, autistic, and not doing too well in school. We have a huge shortage of plumbers, electricians, mechanics, welders, heating and air conditioning. Computers are not going to replace these jobs. There's a tendency to stick their nose up at it. I was in Petaluma, California 2 weeks ago at a 4-H and FFA meeting. When the wind blows 40 miles an hour, they have to turn off the power grid so the wires don't fall down and cause fires because Pacific Gas and Electric just neglected maintenance. That is totally atrocious. Now, who's going to fix that stuff? It's going to be the visual thinkers. They'll be good at fixing that stuff. And the tech industry needs coders. There's Apple's building. That was very, very cool to see that. And this is my book of childhood projects. They do have a few copies of this left over. That's a little bird kite I made when I was in second grade. And I had to tinker to get it to work. These are all things in the 50s, really kites, parachutes, things like this, things I made. Now that's a drawing, one of my jobs. Now when you're weird, you know how you sell yourself? You show off the work. You sell your work, not yourself. So what did I do in a job interview? I'd lay the drawings out on the table, show them pictures, just show them the work. And there's a scene in the movie where a drawing very similar to that is laid out on the table. So why is it marked on there? You have to touch to perceive. Well, when the meat industry went from hand drafting to computers in the mid-90s, we started getting strange mistakes on drawings. Like the center of the circle wasn't in the center of the circle. You see, if you've never built anything, and you've never drawn by hand, you can't draw your drawings right. And they think, oh, we can just do it all virtual reality. Well, guess what? That didn't work at the main rotunda at Denver Airport. They ripped up the whole thing and then left it. And I could have told you that what they wanted to build there, you can't cut the pre-stressed beams that are in there. It's the same material we use in the meat industry to build a meat plant out of. And once you buy those beams, you're stuck with them. You can't change them. And they've got big ones all through the center of the floor of the main rotunda. So that was one of my drawings. And you might wonder, why is it curved? As the cattle come on around the bend, they think they're going back to where they come from. So you show your work off. That's how you impress clients. And that drawing right there is the drawing I sold Cargill with. I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant in North America. I sent that drawing in 1987 to Mr. Fielding of Cargill. 30-second wow, he opened that up, there was that drawing. He got that picture along with it. And that's the replica of one of my systems they built for the movie. I loved how the movie did all my projects really accurately. That's what I really, really liked. And that was my brochure for my business. You got to remember, pre-internet, pre-cheap color printing, had to be in black and white. It was too expensive to do colored printing. So what are some of the common denominators of different minds that are successful? Growing up with books and learning. Early exposure to career interests. Okay, for the cattle industry, it was 14 for dairy cows and 15 for beef cattle when I went out to my aunt's ranch. Learning how to work. Mother got me a sewing job when I was 13. So I'd learn how to work. Really important. I had a great science teacher who mentored me. And then I started to study finally in high school because studying became a pathway to a career. Good teachers make all the difference in the world. My mother had a very good sense of how to stretch me just outside my comfort zone and give me choices. We don't take these kids and throw them in the deep end of the pool. Well, too much multitasking, that overloads that little one-bar phone they've got. So don't do that. I'll tell you what's bad jobs. McDonald's super busy drive-up window, forget it. Super crazy store at Christmas time, that's not the place. Find something that's calmer. Learning to drive, it's going to take longer. I did 200 miles on dirt roads before I touched traffic. You got to get the driving into motor memory before you touch traffic. That deals with the problem of multitasking. But if I hadn't learned to drive, I would not have had any career in the cattle industry. You got to learn. Big parking lots, find totally safe places. And here's the things I liked to do when I was a teenager. And the thing is, horses did two things for me. And there's an article online, you can look it up. It's how horses help the teenager with autism make friends and learn how to work. And one of the few places I was not bullied was when we did horseback riding. And I had friends with horseback riding. And then the working, that was running the horse barn. Got a chance to watch an actual SpaceX launch. That was just beyond cool. And I also loved model rockets. And we had to make our own rockets in the 60s. You didn't get them pre-made, you had to make them. So you have a kid that's all hung up on his favorite subject. So let's say he liked a certain kind of car. Then we can read about it. We can do mathematics with cars. Learn how the engine works and do physics. Read about the history of the automobile. In other words, take that interest and broaden it out. When I was in third grade, I was good at drawing, and I wanted to just draw the same horse over and over again. Mother said, let's draw it saddle, let's draw it stable. Or let's say the kid likes airplanes or they like cars. Okay, let's draw a picture of where you fly to in an airplane. You see, that's an associative link back to that interest. Now, what I've been observing, at almost every meeting, I'll have grandparents come up to me, and they discover that they have autism when the kids get diagnosed, or they're dyslexic. This is happening over and over again. So why does this parent or this granddad have a good job? Learning how to work at an early age. Also, in the 50s, social skills were taught in a much more structured way. There's a little book called Awkward that you can buy online from Future Horizons, and a little cartoon book, the do's and don'ts of this basic social relationships. Nice and simple, that's what I like. But a lot of these grandparents had successful careers. I remember working with a guy who was a really weird electronics guy at a plant. He could build anything if it was electrical. Just a brilliant guy, had a little shop. Yeah, he was probably on the spectrum. That was somebody I worked with in the late 80s, early 90s. Now the thing is, a brain can be more social emotional, or a brain can be more thinking and cerebral. At what point do you slap a label on it? Autism is a continuous trait. I had my entire genome scanned by the Lineagen Company, and they sent my genome scan out to 4 genetics journals, and they all rejected it. They hated it. You know why they hated it? Because the genome scan showed that autism was a continuous trait. Now, I had Mendelian traits for anxiety, bad skin, bad teeth, a weird bleeding problem I've got. I have to be careful about that. Those were Mendelian. It's a continuous trait. You know, there's like a whole bunch of little genetic variations. That's not what they wanted to hear. Yeah, the thing, I wrote back to the other people, the Lineagen Company, and I wrote back and I said, I tell my students there's 3 reasons why papers are rejected. They're a complete piece of garbage, which I don't think this is. Scientific politics, or the finding is so new and different, they don't want to believe it. And I'm saying that seriously. And so I suggested some other journals, maybe some obscure thing we'll have to send it to. Okay, here's a really interesting paper, Genomic Trade-Offs. Are autism and schizophrenia the steep price for a human brain? That's the title of a paper. The same genes that make the brain big also cause autism and schizophrenia. It's embedded. You can't get rid of it. And what I've seen in a lot of families, if you take 2 computer programmers and you put them together, you lots of times have severe autism. Okay, this is what Thomas Edison had to say about mathematics. I'm not a mathematician. I can always hire a mathematician, but they can't hire me. That's what he had to say about that. Where would he end up in today's school system? I don't think it would be real good. And there's my book, The Autistic Brain, where I give you the science for the different kinds of thinking. Yes, and there's plenty more of those online. Okay, I'm worried that our educational system is screening out the visual thinkers because we can't do algebra. This has been showing up over and over again. It's too abstract. But you need visual thinkers in engineering to prevent messes like Fukushima. I couldn't believe it when I found out why Fukushima burned up. It's not a good idea when you live next to the sea to put your super important electrically driven emergency cooling pump in a non-waterproof basement. If they'd put in some watertight doors, it wouldn't have happened. I can't design a nuclear reactor, but all I need to know is that pump doesn't work when I need it. It's going to be so horrible that you just can't believe it. Yeah, it's not going to run underwater real well. Mathematicians calculate risk. Visual thinkers can see risk. A visual thinker can also see the perfect job for a person, too, because I can see a solution to a problem. Now, engineers like their gobbledygook jargon, impact with train. You know what that means in aviation gobbledygook? It means crashing. Impact with train. Well, medicine has its gobbledygook too. It's just as bad. Okay, now I'm going to apply the medical model to airplanes, and it really sounds stupid. This was a real flight to Jacksonville, Florida. And this plane had a microbleed in the anterior proximal rotary appendage. Nice gobbledygook. That's accurately describing the problem with this plane. And this plane could not be fixed could not be doctored at the gate. They got examined multiple times with the aviation illumination probe, and they had to get us a different airplane. But that's, I think it had a little hydraulic leak. That's what it had. That's a microbleed in hydraulics. Okay, if you bust a hose open, that's a burst artery, the hydraulic system. Okay, let's go to the Boeing Max. You see that arrow right there? It's just pointing to a little tiny thing that you can barely see. That's called an angle of attack sensor. I looked up at what that was for. It measures the angle of the air. And that sensor normally is just an indicator on the instrument panel to tell the pilot the plane might be getting ready to stall. You know what they did with this? They took a single one of those, wired it direct to active flight controls, where it could take over the plane and not tell the pilots. Whoops. How could you do that? Now, there's a pile of other mistakes that got made. But there's no way I would trust something there the size of a Sharpie pen that a pigeon can rip off a plane. Well, they did a lot of other sloppy things, like dirt was found in the fuel tanks, a ladder got left in the tail of a plane. They got too beholden to Wall Street. That was another mistake they made. Now, people complain that we've lost common sense. And I got to thinking, what is common sense? I think common sense is visual thinking. Okay, let's say somebody left a water bottle on the floor right where everybody was walking. Well, I'd look at that and go, well, that could be a tripping hazard. Okay, that's seeing somebody stepping on that bottle and it rolling. You see, maybe that's common sense. Now, there's some mathematicians that cannot see problems. There's a condition, I just learned about this about 6 months ago, called aphantasia. These are people that have no visual thinking at all, but they do math really well. Aphantasia. And I think there's some people that just can't imagine what it would be like to be a visual thinker. Well, the movie shows it really, really well. You need visual thinkers in science. I review a lot of journal articles, and I'll tell you, the part of the papers I really rip up, I get into methods. I go, wait a minute, you didn't tell me what breed of pig you used. You didn't tell me exactly how you did your experiment. Because in cancer research, whether you shake your cells hard or you stir them gently can totally change the results. Small differences in methods matter. I really like this Marine Innovation Boot Camp. This shows that there's kind of two different parts of engineering. Okay, you give the soldiers a pile of junk, and you say, make a vehicle out of it. The truck mechanics are better at doing this, at improvising. The degreed engineer doesn't know where to start. But you need to have both kinds of minds. All right, let's look into food processing plants. This is stuff I know a lot about. I've been in a lot of them. I've worked for every major meat company. And what I've learned in working with their engineering departments is the visual thinkers, somebody who's labeled draftsman, lays out the whole entire plant, lays out all the equipment. Also, the visual thinkers over in the shop build all the super clever equipment where it's very, very clever mechanically. Degreed engineers, they're going to do boilers and refrigeration. I can tell us, our non-math people, we don't understand boilers and refrigeration. That's where you're going to need the degreed engineer and the roof trusses. And the problem right now is the visual thinkers aren't getting replaced. Yes, there's a link here. Yeah, they're playing video games in the basement when they need to be fixing stuff in factories. See all that equipment there? It's all imported. And it's imported from a high-wage country because we don't know how to make it. There's 2 pork processing plants, this is one of them, 2 chicken plants, where everything, the chicken plants, everything that's what I call clever engineering, like a lot of conveyors, a lot of complicated stuff coming from Germany and Holland. And there's a turkey plant on order I'm going to see this summer. And they make beautiful equipment, but we're not making it anymore. There's a connection here. I've been in this industry 47 years. We used to make all this stuff. And part of the problem is we took skilled trades out 25 years ago. We're paying for it. And you're talking about complicated things here. This is the Steve Jobs Theater with me screaming in the middle of it. And when you scream in the middle of this, it vibrates in this really weird way. And I was screaming, "We don't make it anymore!" Notice there's no columns. Structural glass holding it up. Carbon fiber roof. It's from Germany. And it's absolutely beautiful. We're not making elevators anymore. I've been checking out elevators. I've been doing elevator survey. If a hotel is like 30 years old, you might have a Dover or a Cone. Cone's a Finnish company. Or an Otis, an American company. 12 to 15-year-old hotels, like a Fairfield Inn, that will have an Otis. The new ones are all German. We're not making elevators anymore. Now, one of the German companies just got bought out by the investors. I don't know what that's going to do to it. I just read that on the plane. Ski lifts, we don't make those either. When I was in high school, I rode a Roebling that was made in this country. And what the problem is we don't know how to make it. You see, this goes back to our educational system. All of this stuff I'm going to call clever engineering. Yeah, and we're not, we like ski lifts very much, but we're not making them. All right, now the thing about people that get a label is they often have uneven skills. Okay, here's Grace Murray Hopper. She was horrible at Latin, but she was brilliant at math. We need to be doing more work on building up the talent area into a job. We also need to be getting kids working, doing chores, volunteer jobs. Let's get them out scouting, get them out doing stuff. Stephen Hawking could do math in his head. It's about all he could do. This is the math that he did in his head. It's called Penrose geometry. He had to do a kind of math where he could store it in his head because he couldn't write it down, because he couldn't write. It's based on these tiling patterns. This is really fun stuff that you can show kids. I just got this stuff free on the line. All these slides that I'm going to show you now in math, they all came off the internet. And you want to find really cool stuff in math? Use the image function on Google. There's a great website called Wolfram Mathematica. Wolf, and then ram like a sheep. Wolfram Mathematica. Code.org for learning programming. Code.org. This stuff is free. And then here's the same tiling on a building, an Islamic building. Quasi-crystalline graphene. I get science and nature. I just can't believe the stuff they're doing in chemistry now. That's beautiful geometric patterns where even I can understand it. Beautiful stuff. Let's get science and nature in the high school libraries. And just let the math kids look at some of the patterns. They're beautiful. Patterns in plants, Fibonacci sequences in plants. That's biology. That's bacteria forming a beautiful geometrical pattern. Yes, and I looked at the coronavirus. It looks very pretty, but it does extremely ugly thing. But beautiful geometrical patterns. Fractals, another fun thing that you can look up. And here's material science and beautiful geometrical patterns. Let's just show this stuff to your elementary school kid, little math geniuses. They might just take off with it. We also need to be introducing them to coding. I'm not suggesting shove it down their throat. Expose them to it. See if the bug bites. When I was in 3rd grade, I could not read. My teacher was really concerned about that. We were using the Dick and Jane books, totally boring, whole word, that didn't work for me. Mother taught me with phonics, and we used a book worth reading. So some kids are going to be a phonics learner, other kids a whole word learner. Use the method that works. There's Stephen Hawking. And he said, concentrate on the things your disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. He could do math in his head really well, and he could float around in the weightless plane. Those are 2 things that he could do well. Visual thinkers like me, artificial intelligence, people with autism and ADHD and dyslexia, we're bottom-up thinkers. Verbal thinkers are top-down, a vague theory. Okay, I'll go to the Green Biz meeting, vague theories of sustainability. But how are you actually going to do it? You see, the way my mind works is that here's a good example of a really good program, like the art program I saw today. That's an example of something really good. Then there might be something else over here as an example of something really terrible. Now, the thing I have found on a lot of good innovative stuff, like that art program today, or maybe an innovative piece of equipment somewhere, it's not done by a committee, 1 or 2 people. Think, 1 TV repairman, 4 bra seamstresses, equal to spacesuit. That's not a committee. And 1 brilliant algebra guy who does math for play and admits that he didn't do any of the work, made a formula that made a 70-pound calculator, that's what they had for a computer, 70-pound calculator box, work. He was mission critical. Okay, concepts are formed by specific examples. So how do I learn like good and bad, for example? You know, lots of times you get black and white thinking. Well, robbing a bank is a whole lot worse than putting gum on the teacher's chair. So you can take examples, okay, spit and spitballs, gum on the teacher's chair. That would go in the naughty category. Robbing a bank is bad, but it's not as bad as killing a bunch of people. You see, you can put things into different categories. Or levels of goodness, holding a door open for somebody. Well, that's not Mother Teresa. See, you can make, with specific examples, levels of goodness, levels of badness. Okay, to learn concepts like up, down, in, and on, you got to give them 5 or 6 different specific examples for the word up or down. The plane went up in the air. I jumped up. I went up the stairs. I climbed up a hill. I put a cup up on the shelf. You see, and then, you see, if I just used up to talk about stairs, the kid might think up only applies to stairs. And here's the iPhone app that can diagnose skin cancer. And when I read how this works, I go, it's the autistic brain. And it's taught with specific examples. Okay, here's pictures of melanoma. Here's pictures of non-melanoma. It learns to sort. Oh, whose phone? Let's step on it. Okay. Okay, here are some tips for learning how to work with minds that are different. Do not overload their working memory. See, part of the problems with some social stuff is a lot of shifting back and forth. Do not burden them long strings of verbal information. Give them a pilot's checklist for anything that has a series of steps. When I worked in a dairy, they had a checklist on the wall of how to set up the milking equipment. That saved me. You got to stretch these kids just outside the comfort zone. Limit the screen time. Give them choices of hands-on activities. Always giving them a choice. Mother gave me a choice when I was scared to go to my aunt's ranch. I could go for a week or I could go all summer. Not going, that wasn't one of the choices. But give them some choices. When you work with the little ones, slow down. When the grown-ups talked fast, it went into gibberish. So slow down. And my speech teacher would go back and forth between enunciating the hard consonants and not. Like we're learning the word cat, she'd go cat, and then she'd go cat-ta. So she'd alternate back and forth between going cat-ta and then cat. Always encourage a kid to use his words. Give them time to respond. You know how that phone on one bar takes time to load a web page? You gotta give them time to respond. Then teachable moments. That's a 50s style of parenting. We're sitting at the table. I demonstrated it today with the president. I took my finger in the chocolate dessert and I went like that. And, okay, bad manners. Okay, now the way that you deal with that is you don't say no, you say use the spoon. You give the instruction. And then you also explain. People think it's disgusting when you do that. You also give the reason for it. You give the instruction. And things like saying please and thank you was much more structured, taught in a more structured way. Every kid in our neighborhood, when they were 7 and 8, when the parents had a party, had to put on good clothes, shake hands with the guests, and serve the snacks. That taught social skills. That's an easy thing to do. Sensory problems, very variable. Loud sounds hurt my ears. Now, one of the ways to help desensitize that, one of mine was balloons popping. Would have been to let me blow up a balloon a little bit and then prick it with a pin. In other words, if the kid initiates the sound, it's easier to tolerate. So if it's a hairdryer or a vacuum cleaner, let the kid turn it on and play with it. There was one boy, they had a great success with the scoreboard buzzer. They took him down into the gym when nobody was there and had him play with the buzzer. And soon he was playing music on it. Now, a lot of kids are wearing headphones all the time. If you wear them all the time, your ear will get more sensitive. What you want to do is to try not to wear them. Have them with you so you have control. So it gets down to control. So you can have them with you, but then you try not to wear them. But they can always be there with you. You know, give the kids some choices of clothing. No, you're going to wear clothes, but we'll give you some choices. And here's an interesting paper you can get that's called Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. It's a sensory desensitization method. You need 3 keywords to find that paper online. Autism, environmental enrichment. So what you might do is hold a cold water bottle and smell aromatherapy at the same time. You stimulate 2 senses at the same time. You always keep changing them. Slow transition from school to work. Chores for little kids. Jobs outside the home, 11 or 12. Church volunteer jobs, dog walking, jobs at scouting, learning to shop. I'm seeing too many kids that aren't learning how to shop. Some of these moms just can't let go. There's a tendency to over-accommodate. And let's have real jobs before they graduate from high school. So by the time they graduate, they've already learned to work. Okay, for kids that have, like a 22-year-old kid I met today, well, let's find him a nice, quiet job. So I said, what do you got in the neighborhood? Well, it turns out there's a nice little business that they could get him a job in. Make it happen. Just skip the interview. Don't make them do the interview. Just get him in a job. Make it happen. One of the things I learned from being in construction is you got to get things done and you got to make it happen. What's the ultimate goal of education? Where's a student 10 years after high school? I was doing those dip-fat projects. There's one of the projects right there, black and white, because that was 70s. There's another picture of it. And when I did these projects, I almost couldn't believe I did them. There's the construction project starting. Yeah, and on the Swift project, I criticized the welding, and I said it looked like a pigeon doo-dooed on it. And Harley, the old engineer at the Swift plant, he was a good job coach. He made me apologize for that. And there's Jim the contractor. He was another important work mentor. He'd seen some of my drawings, and he seeked me out. I would sell it and design it. He would build it. Yeah, very important person there for getting my business started. Now, visual thinking helped me with animal behavior. When I first started with animal behavior when I was in my 20s, I thought everybody was a visual thinker. I didn't know there was different kinds of thinking. That's been a journey for me. And I would tend to notice little visual details other people didn't notice. I watched 100 students walk over that on our campus. That's eclipse shadows on the sidewalk at our library. And the trees are acting as pinhole cameras. I noticed that. The other students didn't. chains hanging down. I still have to talk about this. Little distractions. Cattle notice little stuff that other people don't see. I saw the raccoon in the launch pad, but nobody else did. You know, it's another thing I always notice. If there's something wrong with an electronic sign, those big screens, one pixel that's wrong, I will see it. And there's the dip vat drawing. I remember when I got that done. That was in 1978. And I looked at that drawing and almost couldn't believe I had done it. Non-slip flooring, you got to have that for the animals. Let's see how you are at visual thinking. Raise your hand if you saw that that animal was looking at the sunbeam. Elementary school kids all see this. Zookeepers see it. A lot of them are dyslexic. That's why they're zookeepers. Animal memories are specific because they're sensory-based. I tell people, you want to understand an animal, get away from words. Top-down thinkers overgeneralize. Okay, you train a horse to tolerate a blue and white umbrella. That doesn't transfer to a tarp or a flag. Think about it. An umbrella opening suddenly is different than a flag. You see, it's visual, so it's specific, or it might be a specific sound. My student, Megan Corrigan, did a little study with a children's plastic play set, and she walked the horse like 15 times by the plastic play set. And when she rotated it at 90 degrees, the horse thought it was a different object. It looked different when it was rotated. There's a little yellow tape there. I get asked all the time if cattle are afraid of getting slaughtered. They're more afraid of that yellow tape or a paper towel. This is a brand new plant that installed a center track restrainer system. And this drawing actually appears in the titles of the movie. Now you got a lot of steel work there. These are some of the skills that we're losing. You know, you're not talking, just little simple steel there. And half the cattle are handled in equipment I designed. I think that's doing pretty good for somebody who thought was mentally retarded. That half the cattle in this piece of equipment right here, half the cattle in the U.S. are handled in this. All the big plants have this. This is a machine I developed. There's another picture of some of my designs. Now, when I first put the equipment in, I did a lot of equipment in the 80s and the 90s. And one of the things that frustrated me is half my clients tore it up and wrecked it. The big mistake that I made is I thought I could build self-managing things. People want the thing more than they want the management. And the thing that made the biggest difference was a simple scoring system I developed for meat plants that Wendy's right here in Columbus used to evaluate their suppliers, and McDonald's used it too. And in 1999, when we implemented this, I saw more change. We made the plants just clean it up. And we mainly did repairs, not building a whole bunch of new stuff. Repairs and maintenance. People want the magic thing more than they want the management. Okay, we put laptop in give every kid a laptop. That didn't make education wonderful. And last night on the plane, I talked to a really interesting lady. She's a manager of real estate agents. You know what she told me, and I think this is disturbing. Somebody goes to school to get a degree in teaching or nursing, and then they burn out and quit and become a real estate agent on commission. About 20% of their agents are in that category, on commission only. Well, that really made me think. She was on my flight last night. Now, here are the things you measure. See, the trick is, what do you measure? If it was traffic and I only measured 5 things, I'd measure drunk driving, speeding, stopping, texting, and seatbelts. If I just enforce those 5 things, I'll get 95% of my public safety. So that's the things that I measure. Well, a lot of it has to do with broken equipment and supervising employees. But the trick is, how do you pick out the 5 things? As a visual thinker, I see it. This has worked all around the world. And in 1996, I collected baseline data. It was horrible. And the main cause of horribleness was broken equipment. Then we make them fix it. Make them manage it. So I just want to finish up, and then we're going to have time for questions. There's mics over here. And when I learned how visual thinking was different from verbal thinking, it gave me insight. Because all through my 20s, I thought everybody was a visual thinker. So the first step is you got to realize there are different thinkers. And when you slap a label on a kid, they tend to be really good at one thing and really atrocious at something else. I saw clients today at that art center. They got some professional grade work there. They need to put it in some big shows. Just put it out there, let that work sell itself. So they need to do. Because there's some really good work there. I know how to judge art. Math, I don't know how to judge. I know how to put it in a nice portfolio and make it look good. One of the tricks is, don't give them a whole book full of code. You want something where it's a 30-second wow, nicely presented. So somebody can just look at that and go, oh, wow, that's beautiful. Use like that much memory. And then you describe what platform it's on and make it something they can look at quickly. So what I want to do now is I want to start getting some questions. Now we got one mic. I know there was a mic right there. Was a mic, and I think they got another one right there. And while you're lining up the mics, I'm going to pull a few questions off the audience here. How about right here? I've been looking at you all night. Okay. Okay, all right, somebody's over there at the mic. I'm going to pick somebody. Somebody just get up here and ask a question. Come on. All right, I'm going to pick somebody. Okay, right there. Now I'll repeat it. Kindergarten, okay? Okay, for kindergarten kids, when I was in kindergarten, one of the big things they worked on was turn taking. How to wait and take turns. It was done with board games. We did all kinds of little activities where you had to wait and take turns. That's something they've got to learn how to do that, how to share. And then we just, made things. We did little fun things. I remember marching around with flags. That was a lot of fun. I remember doing that when I was about 3 or 4 years. Fun things, but also, the turn taking. A lot of autistic kids have trouble with taking turns. So we always would have an activity where we did some kind of a game where you had to wait and take turns. Got to learn that. There was a lot of emphasis on that. No, nobody's going to get up to those mics? Okay, all right, right here. And make it short because I have to repeat it. Okay, the question was, what do I wish the teacher had done for me? Well, I'd like to get an age. Okay, what age do you work with? 8 Elementary school kids. Third grade, around in third grade. Well, one problem that I had is nobody understood the sensory issues. And now people are having good success, like with noise. I was terrified of Mr. Russell's vacuum cleaner. I thought it was like this big around and this high, because you got to remember I was little. It probably was only about this big around. And I was terrified of it, absolutely terrified. One of the ways to get me over that would be let me turn it on and play with it. I would have temper tantrums, and one thing that worked is a temper tantrum. The rule is no television for one night. And mother and the teacher always worked together. The rules need to be the same at home and school. Teachers and families need to work together. In fact, my mother said that when she went to talk to the elementary school, Mr. Ladd, the headmaster, had turned down another family because he didn't think that other family could make the rules the same at home and school. That's really important, because then if I pitched a fit at school, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Deach, would call mother, and I'd get home and mother would say, Mrs. Deach called today, and you were kicking and screaming on the floor at school. You know the rule, there'll be no television tonight. That was the rule. The hissy fit equaled the no television. That was some of the stuff that but when I was throwing a big fit, they didn't scream at me and say, take away the TV. They'd just put me in my room, let me calm down. Then when it was all over, they'd say, you can join the family now, but you know the rule, there'll be no television tonight. One night. They just took it away for only one night. They never took away stuff like drawing materials. Never take away stuff that could turn into a career. It was television that got taken away for one night. Okay, right over there.
He was first. I don't want to.
Okay.
Are you sure? Okay. All right.
Well, there's somebody
Thank
over there.
you.
Okay, all right.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
You're talking
Now
to
we're
the
all
mic, and then everybody can hear you.
Well, from the perspective of both the student and professor, what would you say would be the most fundamental challenge of someone from the autism spectrum transitioning from high school to college?
Well, the first thing, I'd already gotten used to living away from home. So that transition, I'd pretty well gotten over that. One of the things is, when I failed my first math quiz, I went to the teacher to get help. And Mr. Dion, the math teacher, actually tutored me in his office. So what I want to say, if you start to have trouble with a course, don't let yourself drown in it. You got to do something about it when you mess up your first quiz. That's really important. Another thing is job-relevant internships. And if you can't get internships, I'm sure at this university, just like in my university, they got lots of different projects that professors do. They need undergraduates to help them with research. Get involved with those things. There's all kinds of stuff. If you just go on the website and look up all the stuff that different professors do, there's so many things that you can get involved in. No, I'd recommend you do that.
Thank you for coming.
Okay?
Thank you. My question is on sensory rooms. I know you were talking about earlier about exposing children to like loud sounds, like with a buzzer, like have them.
But they are controlling it. They are controlling the buzzer. The key is they have to control it.
Okay.
And so they are turning the buzzer on. They are turning the vacuum cleaner on. Now, there's some things where you can't control it. Like this alarm, there's noises in the airport I can't control. So it's okay to have headphones, have them with you. Where you get the control is you try not to wear them. You see, this gets back to the control. Now, there's certain loud, like they open the wrong door and a horrible noise goes off.
Yeah.
And I tolerate it. I can't control that. But I've gotten to where now all it does is make me flinch. That's all it does now.
So your opinion is sensory rooms like okay for the most part, or
It depends how you use it.
Okay.
You know, I had my squeezing machine that I would do for about an hour a day. Another thing I would do to calm down is Star Trek came on at 4 o'clock. You've got to remember, in my generation, there was no streaming. It came on at 4 o'clock. So if I wasn't there, I didn't get to watch it. But that was kind of a little time for me to calm down. And I think it's fine to have some times to calm down. That's fine. But we've also going to have to try to get better at tolerating the world. And now, my sensory problems are nuisances now. I never have been able to hear when there's background noise. I have been functionally deaf when there's background noise for as long as I've lived. So I'm not a big lover of noisy restaurants because it's not very fun to listen to conversations I can't hear. That's always been a problem for me. I can tolerate the noisy restaurant fine, but it's not the funnest experience because I can't hear the conversation except maybe the person that's right beside me.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Okay, nobody there? All right, we got somebody right there.
Hi, so I wanted to ask, like, how would you figure out which way of thinking you use, your
Okay,
mind
how do you
uses?
figure that? All right, let's just, you're thinking about yourself. Well, the first thing I'll ask is, what's your favorite subject in school? And what are you best at school?
Well, that's kind of a hard question,
But you
because,
see,
like,
but this is where I'm trying to figure out how you think. I was good at art. I loved biology. When I got to algebra, I couldn't do it. I like to build things. Okay, mathematicians sometimes really like music. They like math. Word thinkers, they like words. They love facts.
well, I think I'm like, I love math and, like, also, like, love the sciences, so it's kind of like
Okay,
a
well, math,
combination.
and you did well in math in school?
I think so.
Okay. Well, then you may, you maybe if you're just fine in math. This is why it's important to try a lot of stuff on. I think another reason for taking out so many hands-on classes as being bad is I think a lot of kids aren't getting a chance to try on enough stuff to find out what they might like, what they might be good at. Let's go back to Dr. Brown, who's paying for this lecture. She took a high school chemistry class. Now, I got this off a Wikipedia page. I didn't know who sponsored this lecture until just about an hour ago. But according to her Wikipedia page, she took a chemistry class and loved it. Okay, that's exposure. Did she know she was going to love chemistry? No, she wouldn't have known until she took the class. It's that simple. So try different stuff. You're in college now or high school?
College,
How far, what are you majoring in?
computer science.
Are you doing well in coding?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah, Apple's hiring right now. Huh? Yeah, get a LinkedIn page up and start putting your best stuff on it.
I do already have a LinkedIn.
You gotten any hits on it?
Not really.
But you know, I'll tell you a little secret. Half of all good jobs are through the back door. When I went and visited Apple, I had to have an avocado toast with some weird smoothie they served there, this really trendy little restaurant they had. And I sat down next to a guy that Apple had hired, and he got the job because his professor knew somebody at Apple. You see, that's the back door. That happens many, many, many different jobs. So if you have a chance to do an internship with something in the computers, do it. You know, you've got to get involved. They must be doing computer science research here at your university. Get involved, helping out on these projects. They open doors. There's a scene in the movie where I go up and I get the editor's card because I realized if I wrote for that magazine, it would open a lot of doors. There's a lot of doors right here at this university. You're not seeing them. That's something I figured really early on. And so, what's the thing in computer science you like the best and are the best at? What is it?
I guess when you figure out the solution to a problem.
So you figure out the solution to a problem.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of jobs in data analytics. Tons of jobs in that. There's also, you know, big companies. You get into a big company, you can migrate around inside that company once you get in there. Think about it. What would your dream job be? If you could have your dream job, what would it be?
I don't know.
Well, I think you need to get exposed to, they must be doing research in your computer science department. I would start looking up the professors' web pages, looking up their publications, find out what they're doing for research, and get involved in it. It's right there in your computer science department, and you're not seeing it. That's what you got to do.
Got it. Thanks for the advice.
All right. Okay, we'll take the next person.
Over here. I'll be over here.
Wait
Okay.
a minute, you got to talk in the mic so I can hear you.
Oh, I'm over here, this way.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Hi. How do you deal with bullies and people who doubt you and don't understand or know that there are different types of thinkers?
Well, it's you know, hard, and I had a very bad time on an early job with a boss. It was the foreman. Most of the bad things that were done to me, it was the foreman level. Being a woman in a man's industry in the 70s was very difficult. Now, autism was a much smaller barrier than being a woman was. And the one job, there was a foreman trying to make, you know, moves on me. He wanted to have sex with me. I turned him down, so he told the owner that the system did not work. That's very difficult to deal with when a boss does that. You know, that's just sort of, you just got to have to switch to a different job or something. That was really hard. One of the things I had to prove that I could do it, and I had to be 3 times better than the guy. Okay, so where are you getting bullied now?
Oh, I'm not getting bullied, luckily. But I just want to know, in case people are, and you know, people who don't understand that there are different types of thinkers and all that, and just how to deal with
One of the things that helped is when I whip out the drawings, a lot of the comments stopped. So when I did an interview, and there's this, then you can see the scene in the movie, one of my actual drawings is on that desk in the movie, a copy of one of my drawings. They animated these cattle over the top of it. I just laid out the drawings. I just let the work sell itself.
Yep.
That's what I did. So what field are you in?
I'm currently in journalism, but I also want to do stuff with social work, so.
Make yourself really good at whatever you do.
Okay.
And the other thing, like you keep a portfolio of your best articles and things like that.
Yep.
Keep a portfolio of your best stuff, so you always have it to show.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm a high school student with ADHD, and I really want to be a vet tech or veterinarian.
You want to be a vet
one.
tech or a veterinarian? Okay.
Either one. But how
Now,
do
you
I?
worked in a vet's office.
I have not, but I did
Okay,
work.
before that's the first thing you need to do. You need to try on that career, because you don't want to study for a career if you find out you don't like it. So your first step, if you want to be a vet tech or a veterinarian, is to go help out in the vet's office and try it on. That's the first thing you need to do. It's very important to try on jobs. You'll find out, oh, I love this, I want to do this, or maybe I just hate this. But you don't know until you try it on. So I'd recommend doing that first before you go any further into that.
But I worked at the Wild. I didn't work. I volunteered at the Wilds for like this summer, and then I'm doing it the next summer. That was. But how do you keep yourself from like getting? How do you stop yourself from giving up or like losing? I don't know.
From losing what?
Losing motivation or.
You know what motivated me in the 70s? I wanted to prove I wasn't stupid. That was a huge motivator for me, because a lot of people thought I was stupid. And when I did that DipVat project, and I went back and I looked at that drawing, here's a drawing that helped convince myself I wasn't stupid. Look at this drawing. Oh, it's right there. I remember when I did that drawing right there, 1978. And I looked at that drawing after I'd done it, and I go, somebody stupid probably didn't do that. But that was a very, very big motivator for me. I wanted to show them I could do it. You know, and the thing is, get out and try a lot of different things too. What do you like to do?
I really like just helping people and helping wherever I can, I guess.
Okay, well, if you're a vet tech, you're going to be helping animals, but I'd recommend a job like that. Try it on first. Just go shadow in the vet's office. Try on stuff. Maybe you can try real estate. I actually looked up the requirements for real estate. It's a 2-year community college degree or a whole pile of night classes for the state of Ohio. But, you know, try different stuff on. A lot of people that are ADHD and kind of, you know, jumpy, they're good at sales. They're good at sales. Good talkers, good at sales. Yeah, don't put them in charge of a construction site. Don't put them in charge of a plant remodel. You'll have a gigantic mess if you do that. They're not good at that.
I can agree with that very
Maybe
much.
you might be good at sales. Okay, over here.
I'm a speech pathologist in early intervention. What words would be good for parents to hear as their child is just diagnosed
Okay,
with
let's
autism?
say you're talking a really little kid, 2 or 3 years old, and he's not
Under
talking.
3.
He's
Under
3.
3 that
Okay,
has been
now,
diagnosed with
when I was
autism.
3, I was a complete mess. I did not talk. I screamed all the time. I had every autistic behavior there was. The thing I would tell parents with kids at age 3 is they can look really bad, and some of them are going to learn to talk just fine. I was one of them. The
So,
thing you don't want that kid to have is epilepsy. That really hurts the prognosis, which I
so
did not
parents,
have.
though, right now are inundated with, I just found out my child has autism. I need ABA 40 hours a week.
No,
or
they don't have to go bankrupt. Let me tell you what you need.
What do I need to tell my parents to calm them down?
Calm down. Okay,
I say that.
first of all, you don't need 40 hours a week. Okay, I do a lot of talks in a lot real low-income areas. So I say, go to your church, get some grandmothers to work with this kid, and I want 20 hours a week of contact with the world. So that's going to include sit-down meals. Because 3-year-olds, we got to teach basic skills. Dressing, showering, all of that kind of stuff. They've got to learn some basic skills. They need about 20 hours a week of one-on-ones. Now, the thing is, I always ask parents, once you get a therapy program started, is your kid progressing? Now, what I see in a lot of states, and I don't know all the stuff here at this state, is they get an hour of speech and an hour of OT a week. That's not enough. 2 hours a week of one-on-ones is not enough. Everyone will agree on that. And then you're going to need to get some volunteers or get some people in, use those professional teachers as coaches, and get a lot more.
Well, in Ohio,
The other
we
thing
are-
is I don't want to wait until the kid's 5 before I start working.
No. In Ohio, we're actually coaching the parents. We're in their homes, coaching the parents to work with the child. But so many parents, when their child gets a diagnosis, are so devastated, they freeze, they research, and they think, it's got to be ABA, I can't afford this, what am I going to do? So,
First of all, you can put together a good therapy program that won't break the bank.
Yep.
And there's only one thing I sell. I sell books. I don't sell any services. I've had people wanted me to endorse genetics tests and all kinds of crazy stuff, and I go, no. I only sell one thing, books, and I'm shameless about that, but I don't sell any services. And you've got, in the construction industry, we call them vendors, people that you buy stuff from, like maybe you buy steel from, it's called a vendor. And you got vendors out there who want to sell you stuff. The first thing, now I don't want this kid sitting watching TV, vegging out for a year before I start working on them. There's a lot of grannies that can work with kids, but I want to get 20 hours of one-to-one interaction with a teacher. I don't really care what the name of the therapy is. What I have found is some teachers have the knack. There's a knack to working with these kids. You gotta know just how much to push them. Some kids are real sensory. You push them too hard, they'll go into sensory shutdown and nothing will happen. My teacher would grab my chin and get me to look at her. There's another kid that if you do that, they'll go into sensory shutdown. One kid, you kind of jerk that front door open. Another kid, you got to sneak really quietly into that back door. And a good teacher knows just how much to push and get progress. But I'd say 20 hours a week of one-to-ones with an effective teacher. What's an effective teacher? If it's a 3-year-old, speech and skills. Turn-taking, dressing, eating with the utensils, bathroom, that stuff.
Okay.
Skills.
Thank you.
Simple. I like it nice and simple. Otherwise, I don't understand it. Now, there's plenty of gobbledygook. Just remember this airplane with the microbleed and the anterior proximal rotary appendage. And the plane was examined with the aviation illumination probe by the finest doctors at Delta Airlines. That's really good gobbledygook. That's what it is. Okay, over here.
Hi, I'm wondering if you have any advice on trying to focus on your schoolwork when having a sensory overload.
When you focus on schoolwork where you have sensory overload? Okay, this is in the classroom you've got sensory overload?
Yes.
And what's going on in the classroom that's making it so bad?
Well, I try to focus on my work, but hearing people whisper or crinkling of bags or people just talking in general.
Maybe when you really got to concentrate, you do put a headset on.
Yeah, I've
Maybe
been
you
trying.
might have to do that sometimes, but then there needs to be, you need to have it off for half the day. Okay, here's a little tip with dyslexia. You got a kid that's dyslexic, ask them if they ever see the print jiggle on the page. And if they see the print jiggle on the page, try colored paper. Light gray, light tan, light blue, light lavender. Try different colored papers for dyslexia. That doesn't work for everybody. And somebody might say to me, well, that's not evidence-based. And I go, it's just colored paper. It's cheap, it's totally safe, and you can try it in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And sometimes it works. Yeah, there might be sometimes you got to put the headset on.
Okay.
You know, really get the schoolwork done. But then there need to be other times where you're walking around outside, let's take it off. Because I want to try to, desensitize you too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and there'll be times, well, you got to get it done, so you put it on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, what do you do if a child is having a sensory overload and they're just...
Okay, so he's already got big sensory overload, and he's
Yes.
like kicking and screaming and stuff?
What do I tell the managers that work underneath me to do for that
What
child?
age are you talking about?
Kindergarten to 15-year-old.
A kindergarten, I would just put him in another room and let him calm down.
So the
That's
best
what was
thing
done
would
with
just
me.
be to separate them from the rest of the group, just let them de-escalate themselves then?
Well, they wouldn't try to fight with me when I was throwing a big fit. They just, well, they used to in my school. They used to just put me out in the hall, and then when I calmed down, I came back in the classroom.
Okay.
That's what they did. Then the teacher would call my mother, and there was no television that night.
All right.
It was that simple. But the teacher never screamed at me while I was pitching a fit. I'm going to take away the television. No.
What if the
I
parent...
found out when I got home I'd lost the television.
What if the parents aren't an option? I work at a summer camp, so the kids are with us for the entire week. There are no parents.
Okay? So the kid's pitching a fit. Well, you just move away from them, let them pitch it.
All right.
So when you calm down, then you can rejoin the group.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, let's look at why they pitch a fit. Okay, the 3 reasons. Sensory overload, getting attention. Yeah, I pulled some of those. Or get out of doing something. You got to figure out why they pitch the fit. Okay, over there.
So, what would you consider the biggest piece of wisdom that you have received from pretty much anybody.
I don't know. That's difficult to answer. That's very top down. That's like the green biz meeting. What is the most important thing we can do in sustainability? Give me something I can put my head around. I went to this little round table on plastic junk in the ocean. Found out I knew more about it than some of the people there did because I read Science and Nature. Let's start out with something I can put my head around. I learned that garbage gyres, all this floating plastic junk, a lot of it's fishing nets and things like that. Okay, let's get the fishing industry trained so they don't let their gear get loose. You see, now that's a problem I can actually put my head around that. Working on fishing gear getting loose. It's not some big, vague, abstract thing.
From
Well, ultimately, I want the kid to get out and have a life, get a job, have a life. And you get right down to it.
So from like a teacher or professor, then.
All right, you got to give me an age. Am I dealing with a 3-year-old here or a college student?
Well, college to like getting ready to graduate age,
He's in college?
like 22,
22 and he's in
23.
college. Has he ever had a job?
Yes, I've had a job.
Okay.
Asking for me here.
You've had a job, so you know how to hold a job. You start building your portfolio up, because when you're lousy in interviewing, I would just sell the portfolio. What are you majoring in? Help you
Political
make your
science,
portfolio.
pre-law.
Science, pre-law. Well, if you got some good documents you've written, make a lot of sense that you can show off.
Not
Gotta-
really.
you
I
gotta have
have
some portfolio
directs
here.
for mock trial.
What?
I have directs that I've written for mock trial, but it's not anything
Well, when
really
you go in for an interview, you don't want to show a book full of this junk. You want to show a few pages of some of your nicest stuff, where you really thought it out, whatever the case was. If you could have your dream job, what would it be?
working with the music industry in a legal aspect of it. So
Working
like
with
copyright.
the people aspect of the music industry. On what kind of
Like-
law? Contract law?
Yeah, with like the copyrights and stuff with that.
Yeah, and then let me tell you, when I was in high school, we loved Joan Baez and all those songs. They got so tied up in copyright that everybody's forgotten them. There's a point where you can overprotect it, and the music will die. Don't do that.
Got it.
Okay.
I work with junior high and high school nonverbal autistic children. What is your advice on the best approach to get them to pull their words out? They're starting to. We're
Okay, the
making a beautiful
nonverbal?
transition. Pardon?
Okay, so you want to get them so they learn how to do a job?
To better connect with us and explain what they need, even if they can't verbalize
Well,
it.
you're going to have to give them a way to communicate. There's some of these that they can
Yes.
just take an iPad and communicate with a text messaging program, put it in airplane mode so they can't send the messages. I was communicating with a guy who was deaf and he didn't have a sign language interpreter, and we were just passing my phone back and forth using the text messaging program. And we didn't send any message. We just passed the phone back and forth.
One of
It would
them
be something that simple.
One of them doesn't like to use that type of connection, so we've tried to find a way through typing. He's not.
He doesn't like he's not into typing. Well, then he's going to have a board or something where he can point to stuff.
Okay.
See, the thing about nonverbals is some of them have got a locked-in syndrome. Here's some good books to read. You can order them online. How can I talk if my lips don't move? If you're working with nonverbals older than about 6, this book's required reading by Tito Macapadeke. How can I talk if my lips don't move? And he describes sensory jumbling. Also, to teach him something like how to put a T-shirt on. If you yank it on fast, he can't process it. So you have to put it on very slowly so he can process it. And there's another book that's a sequel to The Reason I Jump. And I can never remember the title right. Something like Fall Down 5 Times, Get Up 6 Times. It's the sequel to The Reason I Jump. And the sequel's better because the kid's older. And one of the things he talked about was his people that took care of him, like accommodating him too much. But you're working with these are nonverbals that type independently. You're working with a nonverbal population, you need to read these books.
Okay.
There's Noki, the Japanese boy, a second book, and How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move?
Thank you.
They will give you insight you will not get from anywhere else.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Grandin. My name is Zach, and my wife and I run a nonprofit organization that saves slaughter-bound horses. We've read a lot about your theories and approaches to empathy towards cattle.
Yeah.
And my question to you specifically would be, I mean, as a cowboy who has, who rides with a bunch of guys who utilize a lot of your approaches,
Okay.
I notice a large difference in the equine mind and the cow mind.
Well,
And-
horses are
and-
more flighty, for one thing. A lot more flighty.
Absolutely. And so then I guess what my question would be is my wife and I, we struggle with the concept of an empathetic approach to horse slaughter. And so I guess my question to you would be, do you see there as any empathetic way for horse
I'm not going
slaughter
to discuss horse slaughter, thank you.
Oh,
When the
okay.
potato gets too hot, I drop it. Gets too
Oh,
political.
Okay, I
Just
really
drop it.
appreciate your time. Thank
Okay,
you
I'm
very
sorry.
much.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah,
Be
yes,
happy to
ma'am.
talk to you. I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you again.
No, the problem is certain issues get so hot that if I mess with those issues, they mess up all the other stuff I want to do, like getting people good jobs. That's something that I'm really, so if things get politically too hot, I just run the other way. Gets too hot, I won't touch it. Okay?
Hi. The common denominators you listed, such as growing up with lots of books, learning to drive, and using your words, aren't really relevant to everyone's experiences. Therefore, I'm curious if you see other routes to success.
Okay, all right. So other routes to success. First of all, I've got to get a lot more information so I can start visualizing a different route to success. What are you good at?
I'm asking in general.
I can't answer that. See, that's too general for me to answer. Like, okay, you're communicating with that board. I've got to find out, and you obviously can type, but I've got to find something you're good at. If it was music, was it art? If I was going to employ you, you see, I'm just looking at like an employer, then if you're really good with the written word, then you can do writing. But you see, I don't think in generalities. I think in I could see you, okay, writing. You're going to be a good journalist. Or something that involves writing. You're good at art, you're good at music, maybe you're good at math. And you could do statistics for people. Like we have a statistician, and every time a student does a project, we got to go see Zach to find out how to do the statistics. Okay, that is a math job where you do a service. You see, I don't know what you're good at. If you have math skills, you could be a statistician for people. There's a lot of things you can do. But the problem is I don't know what you can do. You see, I'm only going to think about a road to success where it's something specific. Okay, I think we're going to do one more question.
Thanks.
And I'll talk to people afterwards.
When you're with business partners or friends, do you let them know you're on the autism spectrum?
I've never disclosed.
All right, thank you.
Until, the movie did. But when I'm on a plane, I don't disclose. They know about the movie, I talk about it. If they don't, I just tell them I'm a professor of animal science, and I talk a lot about job stuff. Because that's the thing. Right now, okay, it's 72 years old. I think one of the most important things I can do is to get the kids that are different, get them into good jobs. And I'm very concerned about this losing skills, skilled trade stuff. This stuff we don't know how to do anymore. And the kids that should be doing it, they're in the basement playing video games. And they're not designing video games either. Okay, well, I think we're going to end there, and I want to thank you all for coming.